Hey everyone, here we go. Going to read chapter 6 of Far North. Very excited about this. Let's continue reading about Clint and Gabe and Raymond and the old man and see how their story takes place. Here we go. Chapter 6. This is Cessna 67Z Ray calling Fort Simpson. Do you read? Do you read me? Clint let his finger off the talk button. I'm calling in to report our change of flight plan, he explained. The Unicom dispatcher must have stepped away for a minute. I'm not getting an answer. What's Unicom? I asked. It's for pilots flying in uncontrolled areas. Our closest one here is Fort Simpson. That's who I'm trying to raise. The mountains were on our left now, and closer. Clint handed me a map of the Mackenzie Mountains. Not a flying map, but one I could read, with the rivers and the mountain ranges and all the place names. Then he got busy with his own maps, which were all marked up with notations. He was steering west for a wide opening, a river made in the front range of the mountains. We're awful lucky today, Clint said excitedly. There can be lots of suicide weather back here. The Mackenzie Mountains are right on the boundary between two great air masses, the cold, dry Arctic air and the warm, moist Pacific air. That's why these mountains have such unstable and unpredictable weather. Those two air masses are always jockeying for position, so that means they're fighting for control. Is it going to be warm and moist, or is it going to be cold and dry? Stuff like that, okay? Which can be very, very dangerous if you're flying, which is what he meant when he said suicide weather. So it's dangerous for them to be flying if those two are like arguing, which can weather argue? No, argue or weather cannot argue. Okay, all right. He reached for the talk button again. This is Cessna 67Z Ray calling Fort Simpson. Do you read me? All we heard was some crackling static. We'll try again in a few minutes, Clint said. I wondered if this was such a good idea, to go ahead when we weren't getting through on the radio. Nobody would know where we were going. I thought about saying something to Clint, but he was concentrating intensely on his flying. We were already starting into the mountains. The plane took a good jolt from some turbulence, and then a few more jolts. I cinched the harness tighter across my chest. With a glance backwards, I saw Raymond reach over and tighten the old man's for him. Just a few bumps, Clint assured us. If a Chinook was blowing today, we wouldn't be doing this. We'd be looking at a 50-mile-an-hour headwind, maybe even 70. You see, the prevailing winds come from the west, and they can get heated by pressure and riled up by the terrain, just like water over boulders, as they come pouring down the east side of the mountains. Even if we weren't fighting a Chinook, I didn't feel so reassured all of a sudden. Out either side of the airplane, all I could see was nearly vertical mountainsides covered with snow, timber, and rock slides. I couldn't help thinking about what would happen if the Cessna's engine quit on us. No one would even know where we went down. Clint tried once more to get through to Fort Simpson. Again, no reply. I said, "Don't you have some kind of backup radio or some kind of emergency signaling gear besides the radio?" "Nervous?" Clint asked with a grin. "Heck yeah," I admitted. "Man, this is wild country." There's no second radio, but we do have an ELT, an emergency location transmitter, fastened to the floor of the plane, just behind the partition at the rear of the cargo area. How does that work? The impact of a crash sets it off. If we were to crash, it would start transmitting our location. It's on its own battery, and it's got a little antenna attached to it that sticks up above the airplane. It's good to know that we have that, but I'm wondering But what I'm wondering about is why we're not getting through to that Unicom. You want to try it again? No chance of getting through now, not in this kind of terrain. We'll try again in a few minutes when we get more out in the open. Don't worry, Gabe. Everything's going great. She's running like a top. Lots of times it takes a while to get through to Unicom. That's just part of flying up here in the boonies. I tried to relax and quit worrying. In the deep gorge below us, the river we were following wound like a snake, and Clint was all concentration adjusting to the bends. Just let him fly the plane, I told myself. Anyway, the mountains off both wingtips gave us no choice but to keep following this canyon upstream. No room to turn around here, even if you had to. Hang on and try to think positive, I thought. We kept following the river's canyons, snaking turns, until we finally cleared the path at its headwaters and entered a world of mountains without end, ranges upon ranges, the highest ones wrapped in glaciers and clouds. I was overwhelmed by what I was seeing, thankful after all that Clint had bent the rules for me, or maybe broken them in order to show me this. It was all too beautiful, too immense to be believed, and yet so real. I began to read out loud some of the names from the map I was following, realizing some were names Clint had talked about the first day we met. The Ragged Range, the Sunblood Range, the Sombre Mountains, the Funeral Range, the Headless Range. Hey, Clint, this is a cheerful place. Up here, he replied dramatically, nature reigns supreme. Which I want you guys to think about. What does Clint mean when he says, up here, nature reigns supreme? Now, is he talking about in the plain? Is he talking about just the Northwest Territories? I want you to think about it and come up with an answer to that question, all right? Listen to these. Crash Canyon, Stall Gorge, Death Lake, Hell Roaring Creek. So, where's that Dead Men Valley you had all the stories about? It sits up in a break down in the canyons of the South Nahanni. Up ahead here, that's the very headwaters of the South Nahanni you're looking at. Right up against the NWT's border with the Yukon. He reached for the radio. Now we'll tell them where we're at, Clint said confidently. Cessna 67Z Ray calling Fort Simpson. Fort Simpson, do you read? Do you read me? Nothing but more static. Could there be something wrong with our radio, I asked. It was working fine this morning, he said. But you could be right. There's lots of things that can go wrong with the radio. I don't like this either, but there's nothing we can do about it right now. I'll get it checked as soon as we get back. It's no big deal. Really, it's easy flying from here to Nahanni Butte. Clint checked his watch. It's only noon. Hey, that's why I'm hungry. Too bad we can't eat the scenery, eh? Behind me, the old man was tapping on one of the windows. Caribou, Raymond explained, pointing. And then we saw them, maybe 50 caribou grazing on a windswept patch of grass atop a plateau. Unbelievable, I whispered. I wished my dad could be seeing this with me. Before long, we were following the Nahanni as it slipped from under the frozen ponds at its source in a wide basin ringed by peaks. A stream flowing out of paradise, Clint purred. The river soon tumbled into a broad forested valley, flanked on both sides by mountains, and even more mountains. All along the way, creeks kept adding to its emerald green waters. We saw a moose along the shore, then a black bear. This is it, I thought. The north. The far north. I'm surprised there isn't more snow cover back in here, Clint commented. There's ice all along the shore as I'd have expected, but there's hardly any more ice running in the river than we saw in the Mackenzie. I thought it'd already be past freeze-up in the mountains. But look, the Nahanni's open all the way down through here. Probably it's been Chinooking. Warm winds have been melting the early snow and ice. That's what that means. A Chinook is just a warm winter wind. Okay? Up ahead, just back from the river, a huge mound of orange and white mineral terraces was sticking up out of the dark spruce forest. Clint headed toward it to give us a closer look. That's when we suddenly heard something from the old man. Suddenly, he had a whole lot to say, and none of it was in English. His tone didn't sound too cheerful. I asked Raymond, "What's he saying?" Raymond shrugged. "I've heard about that mound down there. They call it the rabbit kettle. If the water is flowing out of the top, it's a good sign. If no water is flowing out, it's a bad sign." Clint said with a wry grin, I sure don't see any water coming out of that thing. Do you?" I asked Raymond, "What language was he speaking? Is that the language they speak where you're from?" "Yeah, that's Slavey. The old people still speak it." "I thought you did too." "I only know a few words here and there." "Can't he tell us in English?" "No, he only knows a few words in English. He's my great uncle. He was born up here somewhere on the Nahanni. I think he remembers all these places, but I bet he's never seen it from an airplane." The sky was turning murky with high clouds racing in from the west. "Change in the weather," Clint remarked. "Probably the last day where we could have done this." A few minutes later, the old man was tapping again and pointing in the direction of the gray cliffs off his side of the airplane. "Dall sheep," Clint said. "Gabe, see those tiny white dots way up there? The old man still has the eye of a hunter." Up ahead, we saw the river's long, calm stretch ending on a bend where a sudden raceway of white water was tumbling down a gorge toward an enormous cloud of mist. Now we could see where the white water was heading as it sliced down the gorge at a steeper and steeper angle. It was racing to the edge of an immense waterfall. "Virginia Falls," Clint crowed. At the very brink of the drop-off, the river beat up against a towering island of solid rock that rose from the base of the falls. The island resembled a gigantic pyramid. 3/4 of the Nahanni took its furious plunge on the pyramid's right side. The rest snaked around its back and cascaded down from the left. My eyes were mesmerized by the falling white torrents, endlessly plunging, yet always remaining. Even above the plane's engine, we could hear the thundering of the falls. I could scarcely believe the scale of what I was seeing. Clint and I exchanged glances, and he said, "Here's your payoff for coming to the Northwest Territories." "Thanks," I told him. Nothing could beat this. But along with the thrill, my stomach felt queasy just looking at all that relentless, churning power. Below the falls, the river boiled back on itself, again and again, before it sped on its choppy way down the narrow canyon splashed with colors: orange, white, pink, and gray. According to the map, this painted canyon was the first of 4 canyons that started below the falls and got deeper and deeper as they went. Raymond, who'd been born a couple 100 miles downstream from here, had never seen any of this, was studying the endless surging fury of the falls, but his face gave no hint of his feelings. "Naili Cho," the old man said solemnly. "Naili Cho." "That's the name of the falls in Slavey," Raymond explained. "They say it means big water falling down." Perfect on both counts," Clint agreed. "It's certainly big water, and it's definitely falling down. Virginia Falls is a terrible name for it, if you ask me. Some American came up here and named it after his daughter in the 1920s. A lot of people think they should go back to its native name." Clint circled the falls, giving us a revolving look from as close as he dared. Our right wingtip came within 100 feet of the rock slides at the base of the mountain that rose out of the river. The map called it Sunblood Mountain. I turned my eyes back to the falls, noticing details like the enormous slabs of rock sticking up out of the river in the rapids above the big drop, and hundreds of logs down the falls that were beached in a drift pile. Stripped of their bark and branches, as smooth as telephone poles, they spoke eloquently of the raw, grinding power of thundering water. Do many people know about this place? I asked Clint. We were upstream of the falls again, over the long run of calm water that led to the rapids in the gorge, and very quickly to the falls. Some do, he said, and pointed out the little dock below on the river's right shore, along the stretch of the Slack River. There's where the float planes tie up in the summer. Look how clear the river's running, nearly as smooth as glass. What do you guys say about a pit stop? You mean land down there? Sure, we can walk along the cliffs right above the falls and take a close-up look. That's what everybody does. Is there room enough to land above the falls? With a laugh, he replied, all the room in the world. We flew around the falls for a third time, then back upstream a couple of miles before Clint swung around and landed face down, holding the nose up while splashing down so gently the plane barely made a dent in the lake-like surface of the river. Sweet landing, I said. I was relieved he'd landed so far upstream, maybe a half mile above the dock. Clint eased the throttle back. We were about 100 feet from the right shore, taxiing slowly downstream, when suddenly the engine quit. Inside the plane, it was eerily quiet. Not even the sound of breathing could be heard inside the airplane. The only sound to be heard was the dull roar of the falls. Okay, now, that is such a cliffhanger, right? All of a sudden, they're okay, everything's going fine. They land, and the engine quits. They're not tied down anywhere. They're drifting towards the falls. Okay, your question today is to tell me what the cliffhanger is, right? You should know that. And then tell me what you think is going to happen. I want you to email me and tell me what you think is going to happen in the next chapter, all right? So, I'm excited to hear your responses. If you have any questions, come to office hours. We're having some fun in office hours, so come hang out. I would love to see you. All right, peace out, guys. Hope you're having a good day, morning, night, whenever you're watching this. All right, bye.